just takes a little while. It's warming up. Just figure, rainy day, there's a lot of people at home hoping for that webcast. So they didn't need to come today. The webcast is definitely a mixed blessing. Rainy, cold winter days, we should get extra credit for coming here. A lot of people staying in bed waiting to watch the webcast. But on the other hand, it's cool, like maybe somebody in some other part of the world who couldn't walk here can watch the webcast. Somehow I got 700 views. All right, so lecture 12, mislabeled as lecture 11. We're going to go through welfare, do some more graphing and charts and triangles and squares. This will be into chapter 10, sort of trying to go through most of what's in chapter 10. And then we will also, if we get through that okay, we will go to monopoly. And the monopoly case is different from the perfect competition case. One funny thing is that the monopoly, oligopoly, market power is not really in this textbook. But I think it's really important in terms of what Econ 1 is. So I put some other textbooks up there that have just, you can look at the chapters on market power and look at the chapters at cost. So, and this stuff will come back later in the class when we talk about natural resources, we talk about other things. So I think I'll challenge you guys to find a way, if you need a text more than a lecture, to find a resource amongst what I've listed. So the midterm. Ask about the midterm. It's next week. It's chapters 1 to 10. It goes through this lecture. It actually, I'll keep doing on the same stuff on Tuesday, so it will contain stuff all the way through next Tuesday. As I just said, would encourage you to look at some of these other free textbooks. Just, you skim through those chapters on demand, on welfare, on cost structures of the firm, and you'll see things that are familiar. It'll reinforce you. If there's anything that's weird, you go definitely to Khan Academy, microeconomics, look through the stuff on cost structures, look on the stuff of willingness to pay. There's going to be more on the Khan Academy than we did, but, just it's all bulleted out. Find the bullets that you want info on. So mainly what we've done is demand curves and consumers and cost curves and producers. The midterm will be similar to the problem sets. We haven't done the problem set on cost yet, so problem sets we've done are mostly on demand. You can also look at the book chapter problems, and you can look at the website for Peter Burke, who I gave you the reference to, but Peter Burke at ARE has old midterms on there that I can't promise mine will be similar to, but they will not be dissimilar to. The format of the midterm, people always want to ask these questions. What's on there? Will there be true, false? There will be a section of definitions, like 4 or 5 definitions. Write out several sentences. There'll be a section with graphing where you'll answer the question through graphing, and you want to label everything and make sure all your points are going to the right place. Something will draw a base graph, something will change, then you'll draw the next graph, and you'll motivate that with a couple sentences describing what's happening in the graph. And then, like the problem sets, there'll be like a word problem, like talking through something. What would be the solution for this, make pretend real world problem? All right, that's the midterm. Anybody's questions on the midterm? Should be straightforward. So here we're doing willingness to pay. So we're going to go back to looking at welfare, consumer surplus, and producer surplus. This will be a lot of shaded areas and graphs in chapter 10, but also stuff that we've already done. So if we start with the demand curve, the area under the demand curve is the willingness to pay. So we can think about this incrementally, like we do things in a unitary way. So the first unit, somebody's willing to pay up here. The second unit, somebody's willing to pay down here. The third unit, somebody's willing to pay here. So these are each the willingness to pay. And when we sum up all of these little rectangles at wherever the market price ends up being, we get the sum of the willingness to pay for this good. So if our market price ends up being out here, so we have some market price and a total quantity that's demanded. We have at that market price, this total willingness to pay would be the sum of all these triangles, of all these rectangles, of all the people added up that get all the way to this point. I'm not going to draw every single rectangle, but you have to imagine that each unit, the willingness to pay is going down until we get to this point. But there's a big area up here of a whole bunch of willingness to pay that's above the price. If we think that the consumers are paying price P to get Q units of whatever they're consuming, this down here would be the cost to the consumers. This big box, how much they're paying. So out at the margin, the last person is paying exactly the cost equals willingness to pay out at the margin. But up at the top units, the cost is way less than the willingness to pay, right? And that's what demand curve is showing us. Showing us our willingness to pay going up for the first few units. And what we've called this already and done in the homework is this is the consumer surplus. So our willingness to pay minus our cost is our consumer surplus. And this was the problem set that we just handed in. Willingness to pay minus costs. But we can think of it graphically. We're filling out these triangles, filling out these rectangles. One more thing importantly is if we add additional units, if we have n additional units, this area is the willingness to pay for n additional units. All right, so we have a new trapezoid that's moving outward. We've got a whole bunch more units. Price is going to go down, but our willingness to pay is that whole trapezoid as we move outward. So these are our welfare for under demand. Consumer surplus versus the cost of what we paid. What we paid is price times quantity. Now, on the other side, we're going to do the same thing for the supply curve, but we're going to start that by motivating that the variable cost is going to be the sum of all these rectangles for the area under the marginal cost curve. And for the most part, a lot of these things, I'm going to assert it, but we can just walk through the math just a little bit with a discrete function. You could, in calculus, think that you took an integral and you got to the marginal variable cost. But if we say that the marginal cost curve is the cost of one additional unit minus the cost of the last unit, and we showed how we did that on an Excel spreadsheet, making the marginal cost by referencing the different cells. So the cost of the first unit is the marginal cost of 0 units plus the cost of 0 units. And we call the cost of 0 units fixed costs. So we're going to substitute in there fixed cost for the cost of 0 units. And then the cost of the second unit will be the cost of the first unit plus the marginal cost of the first unit. So we're going to get an expanded term here with the marginal cost of the first unit plus fixed cost. So the cost of any given unit is going to be the sum of the marginal cost of each unit as we added it into production, plus fixed cost, which was the cost of the 0th unit, the cost before we started. So if we separate out, this is the total cost. If we separate out fixed cost, and that's how we did that on the spreadsheet, we said that variable cost was equal to cost minus total cost minus fixed cost. So if we subtract out fixed cost, we're going to get variable cost being the sum of the marginal cost of each unit as we add it into production. That's a mathematical representation of thinking about this. So we have a cost curve. And last time, we said that the marginal cost curve was equal to the supply curve. Because what it is like we're taking a schedule of any given price, and we're setting the quantity that we produce given the price that we get from the market, right? So the marginal cost curve in this industry is going to give us a determination of how much is going to get produced. So if we look at this in terms of rectangles, the marginal cost of the first unit, marginal cost of the second unit, right? I can't write this small. Marginal cost of 1, marginal cost of 2, marginal cost of 3. So these rectangles are the marginal cost of each unit of production as we add them in. And we're summing this all up. This will be the variable cost. We add this all up. So let's pick a price that the firm's going to get, and they're going to produce this many units. We could think about this in terms of the market for these units, the price for this, and how many are going to be supplied on the market. So the sum of all these little rectangles of marginal cost is going to sum up to be the variable cost of producing this many units. And we're going to get, in here, producer surplus, right? So the firm is going to get P times Q as a payment, as income, total revenue. And their costs are going to be all under here. So total revenue minus total cost is going to give us this producer surplus. The producer surplus is going to be a payment to profit and a payment to fixed cost, but we can talk about that later. We just know that there's this area below price and above supply. That's this welfare triangle to the producer. At the margin, it goes to 0. At the equilibrium point, it goes to 0, but we take the area of the whole triangle, and that's going to sum up to their surplus. We can also do the same thing again if we produce additional units, Q plus N, that this will be the variable cost of n additional units, right? The area, this trapezoid here, or parallelogram, I don't know what it is going to be the variable cost of adding to the production. And we'll get to that in our analysis later. We already did this one. Producer surplus. So one thing to think about is this producer surplus can both be the profit and a share of fixed cost, like a payment for your rental of your capital of fixed cost. But for the most part, we're going to think about it in terms of firm profit. In the short term, the firm has fixed cost set, and it wants to maximize this area. Yeah, so I just did this, but the area below price, above supply, is producer surplus. That was the graph we just did. All right, so here's just looking at it in pretty graphics. Mostly I leave these in because it's nice when you're reviewing notes to see beautiful, colorful triangles instead of my messy red pen. So we have what's called the first welfare theorem. Welfare economics is the field of thinking about how we're going to maximize the benefits to society of where we are in production. How much goods to produce, how to allocate resources to different goods to maximize the welfare. So the first welfare theorem is that perfect competition, which I went through extensively last time trying to say there's a whole bunch of attributes to perfect competition, a whole bunch of ways that we get there, and there's a whole bunch of things embedded in perfect competition. But one additional one is going to be maximizing welfare. It's going to maximize consumer surplus plus producer surplus, or here I call it firm profit. So consumer surplus and profit are going to be maximized with perfect competition. If we're not in perfect competition, we won't get this maximum amount of welfare. It also, a few other ways to say this, it maximizes the willingness to pay minus the cost. Right? That's the area that we're trying to maximize. That's the triangle that we're going to get. The willingness, the top part, the willingness to pay is the consumer surplus minus how much we pay as a cost. So this is consumer side. On the producer side, we have the cost, the payment, the total revenue minus the total cost. So this term and this term are the same. So we get these two maximized. Willingness to pay minus the cost to produce those units is the surplus plus the profit. So supply curve here, also the marginal cost curve, giving us the variable cost. We have a demand curve. We have some perfect competition, market clearing price. And this triangle of consumer surplus and producer surplus is maximized under perfect competition, right? This welfare theorem doesn't say how this is fairly distributed, who gets which share of it. It just says this triangle is the biggest it can possibly be under perfect competition, where all costs, there's no external cost, there's no hidden information, there's no market power, a whole bunch of things that can get us off of this optimal point. But if we're at this optimal point, this triangle is as big as can be. We can also think about, this is going to happen. I'm just going to try and draw some little ones in here. But so if demand is really flat and supply is really steep, we can see like the bottom triangle will be a lot bigger than the top triangle. Or if this is really steep and this is really flat, the consumer surplus triangle would be a lot bigger than the producer surplus triangle. Just as a way of saying, this theorem isn't saying who's getting the most welfare out of it. It's just saying that the triangle in every case of this equilibrium point will be the biggest triangle of welfare that we can get. So let's think about if we're not at this equilibrium point, maximizing our welfare. So we have this equilibrium point, Q. So if we had, for some reason, restricted the quantity, we have a monopoly, we have a shortage, we have some way that there's some market power, and we have Q less than Q star, right? There is a triangle here that's missing from our welfare. And we're going to call this a loss triangle. We'll do this a whole bunch, and we'll measure the size of these, and this will go through to the end of the class. Sometimes we call it the dead weight loss. Sometimes we just say DWL when we have to fit letters inside small triangles. Right? So we had a consumer surplus and a producer surplus, and we're not at this perfect competition full output. Our quantity that we get of the good is less. There's a restriction, so the dead weight loss, and if we look in here, some of the dead weight loss is coming from the consumers, and some of the dead weight loss is coming from the producers. And we can figure out mathematically ways to like allocate that share. Maybe the government's intervening. You know, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. If we think about, my eraser doesn't want to work. All right, no erasing. If we have a Q that's greater than Q star, this is a little different. We think that we have increased the costs a whole bunch. Our willingness to pay is down here, but our costs are up here. So we now have a loss triangle. So everything below this isn't a loss because people are willingly paying to consume something that they want down at this low price. But there's a loss triangle here for being above the equilibrium where the costs are greater than willingness to pay in that loss triangle. And we will motivate that more a little later when we get into the chapter 10 stuff, where we have an externality to production. So we have some costs that aren't priced into production. Did you have a question? It could move up there because of trade, or as we'll show later, I don't want to, is you could have a marginal cost that doesn't price in some externality, doesn't price in some pollution. There's something missing from our marginal cost curve. So we're maximizing surplus. If we have a dead weight loss triangle, we also have a loss triangle if we increase. So skipping to what I was trying to motivate, and this is what all of chapter 10 talks about and sort of works through. So there's some external part of production that's not priced in, and it's sort of fundamental to environmental economics. And the way they motivate it here is there's some pollution that's a marginal cost that goes to society but not the firm. The firm is just looking at that spreadsheet of their cost functions, how much they're spending on electricity, how much they're spending on water. They're not looking at the cost of how much they're polluting the river, how much environmental services of the air they're using by throwing sulfur dioxide up into the air. But that's not in the firm spreadsheet. It's in society's spreadsheet. So society's welfare is going to be a little different because the society is going to have all the costs. It's going to have another set of costs. So the firm spreadsheet has got its variable costs, and then society has this other column that's like, we have a whole bunch of extra costs from this pollution. We have asthma in little children that we have to pay in the hospital, and we're going to add like a column on asthma costs from air pollution, add that to the marginal cost that we have. So in our market system, the company only pays the cost that it sees. The company only pays its own costs. And so the company is going to produce at a different quantity than the point that maximizes the welfare for society. So what we could motivate this by is there's, a marginal cost for the firm, but as this firm produces more and more, there's more and more pollution, and there's a marginal cost of pollution. Marginal cost of this externality or external cost. Oh, I forgot I can't erase. All right, so there's this external cost. And so a societal marginal cost function would add these two up at each point, right? We want to add these up and get a marginal cost function for society. I lost my paper place here, but there's going to be a new marginal cost curve to society that's going to add. So these is dollars. So when I do cost, I put dollars per unit output, and as output's increasing. So the society is going to be this plus this. It's going to give us a marginal cost to society of units of output or production, right? Some of the examples we had was the paper mill polluting the river. We had lettuce production polluting the groundwater. So the firms are just seeing how much it costs to produce paper, how much it costs to produce lettuce, but society has to pay for the lack of clean groundwater, the lack of clean rivers. They have a lot higher prices to produce each unit. Here it is in the prettier sense. So if we add in a demand curve, the firm wants to produce out here, but society is going to set the marginal cost supply curve up here. And the societal level of production is less because of this externality. There's pollution. We'd rather have less total produced. At this less total produced, we would need to pay more. The price, if just the firm supplied it, would be lower, but the price for society